Thank you so much for introducing me also to Kaki, and thank you for introducing me, and I welcome everyone who've come here to join and listen to me on a Saturday evening. Uh, I'll just get right away with sharing my presentation. I hope everybody is able to see my screen. Uh, uh, Thanks. A little background on myself, a little more before I start into it, that I grew up in Pune. I did my schooling in Pune, but I was born in Kathiawad, that is Saurashtra, the district of Bhavnagar. I say this because you will see repeatedly in my work why I have tried to go back to my roots in all possible forms. So after my schooling, and I joined design, and one of the reasons I joined was I vaguely knew that was the year 1995, and I knew I wanted to work in villages because all my school summer vacations were spent in the villages of Bhavnagar, and those are my most amazing and really dear memories. And with that intention, I joined National Institute of Design, and I ended up studying textiles. So after my brief 4 years in textiles, we have to do a graduate research project of 6 months, and mine was in Kutch. And this is a picture of my first day in Kutch when I was, going to the village in a bus. And those days there were only one bus that would come in a day, and the next one would be, a day later. So just one of them, and I forgot my water bottle. And when I entered one of the house in the village, the Bungu, I saw this amazing piece. It's called an Ochard. And of course, the organization I was working with, Kutch Mahila Vikas Sangathan, had told me that yes, you do something with the applique textiles. But this is what I saw. I forgot my thirst. I was just amazed to see this amazing colorful wall hanging. Now we call it a wall hanging, but for them it's an orchard because behind it you will see all things, the quilts and everything which are just stacked over the other, and this is a curtain just over it so that it hides away their belongings, and you see the rest of the belongings in the base. So this is what struck me the most with the colors, and it was a symbolic, metaphorical tree. As I went further, I saw that the trees were different. Now, the one on the left had these, if you see carefully, you'll see these triangular patterns, which were also applique. And here on the right, you see a tree which is realistic with branches and leaves. And there was something different here. The tree on the right, each of the leaves were of different color. Whereas on this side, the trees and the wall hanging made was from something very new fabric is what I saw, very colorful, but it seemed new. Whereas the one on the right seemed old, and the tree seemed more realistic and more original. And later over the years, over the months, I realized that the one on the left was made using stencils given by the government. So you see the camel, the peacock, the elephant, all of these were standard stencils provided to the women of Rajput communities, and they were just putting it on the poplin new fabric bought from the shop, and they would cut out and then they would hem it. What interested me was the pieces on the right, and that's where began my journey going village to village, finding the old pieces. So these were some of the older pieces that I saw, and I was mesmerized because if you see the tree on the left, amazing colors of each leaf being different. There was not even one repetition, and that really irked me to find out how did they come about. And that's where, of course, I realized that they were all made from their dupattas, from their old skirts, from their blouses. And it just made something so amazing. And mind you, this was in Kutch, a place in a village where you are surrounded by arid land. You might just find one neem tree near a bus stop, and the rest of it is all thorny bushes. So in this backdrop of barren land, one would see this burst of color and imagination. And each tree had this geometry. One thick trunk, three branches, three pairs of branches, and you have the peacock on the top, the birds on the top, and the elephants on the ground. And the three branches would, one going deep into the earth, the other is here in air, and the third one is towards heaven. That's the symbolism which we now try to interpret through our research. But by then, when I looked at these old pieces, and if I asked them what did they mean, they would say this is what we've been doing for all our lifetime. And these were the pieces created by women who were old because their eyes were failing. They would rather do embroidery when they were young, but as their eyes failed because they used the firewood for cooking, that's when they shifted to applique. And the beauty of these applique textiles, these ochar, lay in the way they use their old fabrics. So these were the people, this was the land, this were the Jadeja and Soda Rajput women I was working with Kutch Mahila Vikas Sangathan. And on your right were my mentors, Pankaj Bhai and Meena Ben, who were the head of the brand label Kasab, and with whom I was working. And these were the landscapes where, I would see the goats, the landscape of the arid land, and also the way the cattle was used and the applique that was, draped over their backs. And these were textiles made when they go for their weddings. So this was 6 months project where it was a research project where I documented all the textiles and brought those motifs back into their repertoire and created newer products, but using the vocabulary of their traditions. And this photo, the picture on your left, is a classic example of their uniform and how the white shirt has become the flowers and the blue skirt must have become the backdrop of this toran, which is used again during weddings. They drape this on their thresholds. That was Amjiba, who I worked with, who helped me document these appliques, and I have put her picture because with every bird she embroidered, she had a song for every bird. Unfortunately, I was in a time when there were no mobile phones and a recorder where I've lost the cassettes, but that was the beauty where it was just not art and creativity in color, form and pattern, but there was a living knowledge being played out when I was sitting with her and working. And this is where by the time in 2000, when I finished this project, I felt that the seeds of art and sustainability, the word sustainability had not come in our repertoire or our design language so frequently then. But what was important was that these were age-old traditions. My grandmother also did it. All our mothers, all over India especially, we all have made quilts and done small little patchworks. But this was unique because these women worked with color, with expression and emotions amidst the landscapes that were barren. So they were stretching their imagination and creativity, and that was interesting about this place. And here are the women I used to stay with and the place I lived with when I was finishing my project in 1999. From then I went off to Kerala and I started working with an NGO called Tanal, and they were starting the Zero Waste Kovalam program in Kovalam in Trivandrum, and they were looking for somebody to address the textile waste which is littered on the beaches of Kovalam. Now it was interesting because I had just come from Kutch, which was a barren landscape, and within a year or two I was shifted to Kerala, which is green, tropical, full of trees and amazing greeneries. And then they had a different kind of problem, and this was a philosophy. This was the first Zero Waste Kovalam program ever being established in India, and the whole idea of zero waste was that they wanted to boost the local economy of Kovalam. They wanted to generate livelihoods for the women there and convert local resources, whether it was paper, fabric, coconut shells, all of that into environment-friendly products. So I was assigned the job of doing something with the textile waste because Why they're littered on the beaches is because there are lots of tailors on the beaches. The tourists come and stitch their garments, and then the tailors will just dump it on the beach, thinking the tides will sweep them away. And we all know out of sight is out of mind, but when the low tide comes, everything is thrown back on the beach. So that's how we started collecting. And I began this initiative called the Patchworking Women's Lives, where we got 6 women together who were tailors, who used to make blouses, salwar kameez and skirts, and they were going to be part of this initiative in doing something with discards. Now, initially it was tough because they felt, why are we not given old fabric? Why are we given old fabrics? Why are we not given new fabrics to work with? Because it's, when they make their blouses and skirts, you buy yardage fabric from the shop and cut it and use it. So there was a issue where they felt, why we have to deal with such dirty scraps full of sand and everything? Is it because we are underprivileged? So for me, it was a big learning and also a time of introspection of how I was going to work with them, because I had already seen amazing pieces of art done in Kutch. And that's where we started working with trees of Kerala. I had already seen trees in Kutch, and this is what I was most, it was something so dear to my heart by then. So looking at the greenery of Kerala, I said, okay, let's start making trees of Kerala and make wall hangings which can be sold to the tourists. Now, they were making blouses and skirts which would, just probably give them 500 or 800 or 1000 rupees per month. But here we were trying to make works of art which would really generate more livelihood. Of course, they had inhibitions because they said, we are not artists, we can't draw, but everything was around you. I just said, you pluck a leaf, they would pluck a leaf, and then since we were working with scraps, there was no fear of wasting fabric. So we would cut a scrap and make the right shape and then make the realistic trees. Now you will see the difference that the trees of Kutch had leaves which were red, blue, yellow, green. That was a kind of imagination they had and which was a tradition with them. When I started working here in Kerala, for them, leaf is green, is green, is green. It cannot be any other color. And I didn't want to tamper with that because that was a sensibility they were coming with. And what I wanted to transform them were into artists where they could stand on their own and not depend on me. And the magic happened. I saw Patchworking Women's Lives initiative as a magic, and they also saw that a scrap of fabric could become this amazing tree. The one on your left is the Kanikonna. In Gujarati, we call it Kare. And the one on the right is the Jamun. You get the pink Jamuns in Kerala. So they made the Jambakya tree. And it really said that, their world, their way of seeing altered, their way of looking at discard altered, and they actually broke barriers of creativity, that anybody can be creative. It just requires a sense of appreciation, a little bit of patience, of course, but to trust your instinct at times and, just break out of your inhibitions. So their artistic imaginations really flowered, and we made really 30 trees, all the trees of Kerala, and they could see that they could sell them with tourists at a higher price and definitely were making a difference in their own lives as well, with their children and everything. The whole dynamics changed. Now, while working with Tunnel was a group of environmentalists, and you must have seen the picture in the earlier slide of my mentors. They were environmentalists working against pesticide, against many other environment and farming movements. And one of the movement that they were starting with in 2005 was the Save Our Rice campaign, where they were trying to save the traditional varieties of rice which were being wiped out by the genetically modified seeds. So this was a campaign that started, and they were going to have their first workshop on rice in Kumbalangi, a place in Kerala by the backwaters. and they saw what our women were doing in zero waste. So at the conference, we thought that let us have a backdrop of the conference, which is this banner, which will talk what this whole campaign is about. So these 6 women started reading and started interacting with my mentors on what this whole campaign is about. And if you see here, on your left, you will see the green fields, the rice fields. You'll see, if you can see my cursor, there's a white bird, the egrets, you'll see butterflies. You have a river with fishes and boats and houses which had wells, bullock carts. And so it was an environment where the whole ecosystem thrived and the river water was fresh and pure, and that was irrigating the land. So you will see these blue lines along the fields is the water from the rivers irrigating the fields. In the middle of the banner is the dam that comes in, and then you see, the affluents from the factories flowing into the river. The river no longer has fishes. The color of the water has changed, and you will see more of houses, no more wells. In fact, on your far right, you'll see these lines of pots because there's scarcity of water. You'll see farm monocultivation where there are these banana plantations, and there's a man spraying pesticide. So the whole landscape had changed, and this is what these women themselves ideated. And that's where it started emerging that these discards were actually becoming our crayon box. We were treating the sack as a crayon box from where we were using color, patterns, and telling our stories. And discards actually became a vehicle of telling across very complex ideas in the most creative and the most illustrative way. Again, in the next year, we were approached by an organization called Tourism Watch in Germany, and they were doing a survey all over the world about how tourism has impacted communities. And this was a banner created by these 6 women about how their own lives had changed in Kovalam after the effects of tourism, how they had lost their traditional livelihoods, and with tourism, how they were facing the menace of, the mineral water, plastic bottles. Then there was AIDS, there was prostitution. There were a whole lot of things which were impacting their lives. And again, in the banner, if you see in the lower panel, the green panel, you'll see all their traditional livelihoods. They used to have orchards, fruit orchards like the banana and other cultivations. There was rope making. They would weave and braid fences from coconut leaves. So there were a whole lot of livelihoods that they had, which got wiped off once the tourism industry came in. So some became, fruit sellers, some were doing laundry, some became waitresses. So many things had changed. And then some they put symbolically, like you have the AIDS symbol. You will also find syringes that they have drawn. I felt these were their silent voices because they never blatantly spoke about it to a journalist. But when we would have lunch during our breaks in our organization, and they would speak, and over the years, I was being exposed to the hardships and other things of their lives, and I felt this was the best way they could explain and illustrate what they were going through. So after my few years with Tunnel, my son was born, and I decided to stay grounded for some time at home to nurture him. But at that point, I started collecting old clothes from the buildings around me. I used to stay in an apartment. And I started collecting old clothes from each of the neighbors, thinking I will make my own artworks. And what struck me the most is the kind of old clothes I got. I always thought old clothes would be something which is torn, faded, just cannot be used anymore. But in fact, I got things which were new. And when I asked them, why they look so new, you can use it. They said there were a couple of reasons which I got. One of them was that they were bored, or they had not worn it in a year, or their cupboard didn't have space. So or they wanted to, discard a memory. They must have worn something and something bad happened. So there were various reasons I was getting for this. And that really struck me that, oh, I really need to change my definition of what I think as discard, because it's just a different pattern. Because I was only working with scraps, which were from the tailors, and this was a new definition that I got. So over a period of 3-4 years, I tried to make meanings from this. So I made a series of wall hangings and the whole exhibition, the collection was called the Sacred Grove Trees of Vrindavan. And I was just trying to picture a theme of Vrindavan, of Krishna. But in the process, what I was doing was trying to find beauty in the faded. So when we buy fabric garments from, let's say, Westside or Fab India or any of those brands with beautiful block prints, and they fade. But there was a beauty in that faded that I was seeing. And when I was doing this, I was stopping it from letting them go into a landfill. And I was giving a meaning to each of those scraps. So for example, here a block print became leaves of a canopy, or the linear patterns became grasslands. So I was giving different meanings, and it was just fitting correctly into this whole landscape of my artwork. Some more, when I worked with later over the years, I started working with more organizations, and this was with an organization called Kabni and Avni in Calicut. And this was a very interesting community in a place called Nirava Vangeri. It's a ward, an area in Calicut. And this group was facing a lot of cancer patients in their community. And these women and men and the youth of the community got together to do something about it. So the women started doing organic farming, and the men started working the economics of it, of how they would sell, through markets, what they were growing in their kitchen gardens. And the youth started looking for more innovative and renewable energy resources. So if you see in this picture, on your right corner, you'll see these two houses, and the women started doing friendship cultivation. So you would have fences on both sides. There's a road going under it, and they would grow all the gourds and the cucumbers. And so they had a beautiful friendship, and this was a place where no house ever closed their gate. So anybody could walk into the kitchen garden of their neighbor and pluck a lemon or a chili or any of the vegetables that they wanted. The youth started, they installed solar panels, they installed gobar gas plants. And if you see here, there are 3 potted plants, and over it, they have the syringe bottles which they collected from a nearby hospital to make drip irrigation for all their kitchen gardens. So the youth were really looking at newer ways of working, and this was really a revelation to me. And they illustrated all of this using scraps, that how a community can get together, share their ideas, products and services, and spearhead the entire community towards a better future. Since I had worked with farmers and environmentalists, this is an organization called BioBasics in Coimbatore. They promote organic foods, and these were packaging I was doing for them, and they wanted to really highlight the contribution of Indian women in rural farms. So Indian women, especially in agriculture, do so many jobs. They do threshing, they do pounding, they sow the seeds, they do grinding, but all of this is never acknowledged, or even most of it is unpaid labor. So the brief given to me was that they want to acknowledge the role of women in Indian agriculture and fight against marginalization. So these were packaging bags where from scraps of fabric I made these different stories about what women do in the farms, and they were appliqued on bags which were sent to their customers when they sell their organic produce. So over a period of time, while living in Kerala and with an organization like Tunnel, I had many environmentalist friends, and we would go on forest surveys, bird surveys, and while listening to them and talking to them, I was slowly realizing by the 2005-6 climate change was being talked about, and they were talking a lot about sustainability. And while going on these bird surveys into the forests, they were talking about how the bird numbers were coming down, how the forests were being impacted, especially Kerala, which has the evergreen Silent Valley National Park, and how it is drying slowly, the moist forest. So all of that really made me understand and made me think about how I can put these stories across. So I started illustrating birds of Kerala, especially those birds which were being impacted. And the discards were the best way possible, because if I saw an Indian pitta, it's called the Navrang in Gujarati, which means 9 colors. And I had to painstakingly look through my sack of waste, match every feather with the bird, and illustrate birds. So I started illustrating these birds on cushions, on curtains, on bags, and create a larger vocabulary and creating awareness about how birds and generally the entire biodiversity is being impacted by climate change. So this is Kharmor, which means the bird of the grasslands. Again, a bird which is being threatened in Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. The Agha, which in Nagaland means an elder brother. It's the state bird of Nagaland, the Blitz tragopan, and the Nano Kalkalio, the common kingfisher. So I have done many. I've just put few examples to show that how waste and discards can be the most amazing resource for illustrating things, where I could just get the right blue, the right pattern, and interpret it in the way possible to illustrate these birds. I later started working on more commissioned art also, and this was one for a client in Bangalore. And the beautiful part about this one was I was given a brief about Krishna, if I could do something about him. And this is what I thought. Again, the birds were my favorite theme. So this is a grove, maybe somewhere in Vrindavan, and the Krishna is present quietly, omnipresently under the tree, with the way I have placed the birds, the flowers, the white flowers, the way they are placed. If you look carefully and gaze, you'll see Krishna standing with his flute and playing his flute. So the whole idea was again to tell stories through birds about a topic which is so sacred and has so much of emotions and love and beauty in it. Some other commission works where it was interesting, the way I started working with commissions was most of the clients came to me saying, Medha, we want 5 birds. This was a client from Delhi, and that's it. The brief was just that. So my whole, as an artist or designer, my whole idea was to see where these birds live, in what ecosystems they live. And if the person is in Delhi, I'm sure he goes to the Himalayas. So I wanted to create the whole Himalayan biodiversity. So do research on which are the birds that live there, which are the residents. And this is how I created a commissioned art for, which has nearly, I think, 800 pieces of scrap. But it tells a story about the whole ecosystem where these 5 birds live in. So another one where this was a client in Germany, a friend of mine who lived in Rajkot for many years and later shifted to Germany. And he wanted 3 pieces, one for him because he loves cycling, one for his wife who loves swimming, and his little daughter who loves elephants. That's all I got as a brief. But when I dug further, when I looked at his social media and also knowing him for a long time, that he loved cycling in the meadows, and he'd had an amazing journey in his life with his trials and triumphs. And that is what I wanted to show when he cycles, that how the birds are like his migration from Rajkot to Germany with all his trials and all his life stories that he took along when he cycled from here, metaphorically cycled from Gujarat to Germany. His wife, who loves swimming, I imagine that, when you swim in a lake or a pond, the feeling is different because you're part of the waters, which has fishes and a different ecosystem, and how one immerses oneself in the waters. And when his daughter liked elephants, I was thinking of elephants that swim and, spray water. And I just want to show a small clip on these three images of my artworks. Just give me a minute. This was a much recent piece in 2024, a client in Switzerland. She has roots in Kathiawar, and what the brief I got was that she reminisces Kathiawar, but she's never been there. She was never brought up there. She lived in US, but she wanted the feeling of Bhavnagar, of Kathiawar, to come through at a very important juncture and a very important moment of her life. So I, being from Bhavnagar and lived for many summers there, I wanted to see this region geographically, even from its historically or even through its folk stories, through a different eye. And that's where I was reminded of Kag Bapu. Kag Bapu was a amazing folklorist who passed away in 1977, born in 1903. He was a poet, and he always narrated story. He had a great importance for art and beauty in literature, and he narrated folk ballads. So I wanted to see Kathiawar through his eyes, of how he described landscapes, how he described the first rain after a very parched summer in Kathiawar, because we always have very hot summers and very hot droughts in the lower Gujarat peninsula. So you will see three panels, each telling a glimpse of his ballad. So the first one was the approaching monsoon storm, and it's about a Kharwa fisherman who live in the coastal villages of Kathiawar, and he is in a storm, and he's praying that he comes back to the land, and he's praying to the temple which is at the shore, and the birds are also eagerly waiting for him to return, and how he carefully steers through the storm, and they're eagerly waiting for his return. And that's how you see even the storm, the leaves are all flying in one direction. The one in the middle is his sister who is waiting for him, and that's when the first drops of rain from the summer are falling in the forest, in the scrublands of Kathiawar. So the trees are nearly barren and brown, and the nature is rejoicing. All the peacocks are up in the canopies, whereas she still sad waiting for her brother to return. And the third panel was about the fields. Because we have such huge bouts of drought, rains are the most important part of our symbolism and songs and folk tales and stories. So that's where the fields, when we grow crops, we normally grow jowar and bajra, and they are all rain-fed crops, and the farmers really work through these fields, toil really hard, waiting for the rains for these millets to grow. So this panel represented the resilience of the land and the people of Kathiawar in many ways. And we always have temples on these little hillocks. And this is what I wanted to, bring Kathiawar to her home in the most original and the most creative way, where I also use the craft techniques of Kathiawar, that is applique and embroidery motifs of the peacocks, the birds. And this is Kag Bapu, who his ballads are on YouTube, and he has an amazing way of describing, and he was my inspiration in creating these three art panels. Since we are talking of Kathiawad, I would now like to shift to a project which is very dear to me. I have been studying the beadwork of Kathiawad since 2012. It is a self-funded and self-initiated project, and this is what my community does. We make beadwork objects as dowries when we are getting married. So we young girls create these textile pieces using glass beads. So how did this project start was when I was in school, I used to love seeing Bharat Ek Khoj on Doordarshan, and that's when I always thought I'll become an archaeologist or an anthropologist, but I went into design. But after going to Kutch, I think everything was coming together somewhere because we were all talking about material culture. So in 2012, I took part in the archaeological excavations with the Kerala Council of Historical Research. And it was here in this place called Mujiris, which is near Kodangalur. And we were excavating a whole lot of beads, and they were glass beads that were being found in these trenches. And you'll see the middle picture where we were sieving through the sand and finding these really small seed beads. Now, if you see the beads that I am talking about is the one in this semicircle right in the center. I have put a circle around it, and that's the size of the beads that I was talking about, which is of the 14th, 15th century, made in Murano, Italy, and it traveled a long distance, reaching the coast of Gujarat, that is Saurashtra. And my whole research started thinking that how did these seed beads come, because I remember my great great grandmother, who's on the left, she made a similar a piece, this purse, for her wedding in 1901 when she was getting married. And this was the piece I inherited from my mother during my wedding. And that really struck me when I found the seed beads in the archaeological excavations in Kerala. And that's where my study started in 2012, to understand how these beads came all the way from Murano to Gujarat, to the Saurashtra coast, and how these women started knitting these beads into their dowries. So the one extreme corner left, this is a coconut with a pot and a little stand which we all wear on our heads during the wedding. So this is also all made with beads. What is interesting here is the sophisticated sense of mathematics that these unschooled women must have used, because they take 3 beads at a time to knit these pieces. So imagining, without graph paper, pencil, or any kind of drawing or writing tool, how they must have worked to create these pieces of art. So this is the way I've been studying the coast and how things must have reached the Gujarat coast. So I've been studying the sea routes to understand, and the trade routes to understand the way the beads must have traveled. These are the women which one can imagine who must have been making beadwork since the 18th, 19th century, because the Italian beads started, their manufacturing started in the 15th century, but over the years they traveled to Africa, they became currency in Africa, there was slave trade where beads were used as currency to buy slaves, and from Africa they must have come to the Gujarat coast, because Gujarat coast has had a lot of businessmen, lots of traders since the 9th and the 10th century, doing trade with Africa and the rest of the world. So I was imagining, and I've been trying to put together, who were these women who created these wonderful beadwork, because embroidery was already part of their vocabulary. So if you see this woman, she was already making these wonderful embroideries. So when the beads came in, it was just an additional accessory which they started using into their works. So some examples here that how women started using beads to tell their stories. So in the top panel, you'll see it's a bride and a bridegroom in a wedding. This is a wedding procession. After the wedding, they are praying to the goddess. We call the Randal Ma, where we all hold hands and pray to the goddess together and dance and sing together. So that's what has been illustrated there. In the lower panel, childbirth is such an important moment in any woman's life. So that has been symbolized through cradle. And here she's also shown again the bride and the bridegroom. So there's always a kind of a narrative with a, starting and ending point in all the beadworks. All kinds of transport and animals. So you will see a horse cart. On the top panel, you'll have cows and calves and little birds. Here you have the one, for plowing, they use the cart for plowing in the fields. You have camel carts, and these are little caravans which were made. So, and the lowermost is a tram car, which is again complex beadwork. And my research for last few years has always been into how they work with pattern and symmetry, because when I'm trying to decode these motifs, I cannot sit without a graph paper, a color pencil, and trying to figure out and plot this entire tri-bead system where they use 3 beads at a time to knit and ideate. So their level of visualization, imagination, and using motifs from their environment has what made beadwork narrative so fascinating and really works of art. So these are little clips from a very long panel, which might be at least 25 to 30 feet long. And to give you some idea, so if you see the blue in this picture, the blue wall, and on the blue wall, you see these long bands. Those are the size of these beadworks, which go really long. So they are the narratives that have been put together. And these were part of their dowries. Unfortunately, today, young girls don't make this because they have lost this knowledge system of ideating new motifs. So now they either get, standard patterns to work with from their mothers, but much of the traditional knowledge of working and doing these complex motifs has been lost. And I'm trying to work on what was the mathematics and this sophisticated of visualization that they could do in earlier centuries. This is my last part of the presentation, which tries to sum up all that I have tried to say. And this is what I try to educate today, especially when I'm with design students and also people from other walks of life, that language is the heart of culture, because that's where Kagh Bapu came in, because more than visual language, the literary language is what moved me, because it was his thought, the way he sees the world in the vernacular language. So, for example, this bird, which is called the Indian pitta in English, in Gujarati, it's called Nav Rang, which means 9 colors. And in Tamil, it's called Aramani Kuruvi. Aramani, which means 6 o'clock. And Kuruvi is the bird. So it is called the 6 o'clock bird, which means it is trying to say that in Tamil, there must be our forefathers who must have observed this bird and given it a name, seeing that it really calls at 6 in the morning and maybe around 6 in the evening at dusk. So they were building this intimate relationship with the bird, and that's what made, it as a part of our environment. So when we are talking about environment, discards, climate change and everything, till the time we look at biodiversity as a resource which can be exploited, it can never, our English the language of English has all words which tends towards looking at our biodiversity, our rivers, our lands, our mountains as resource, whereas our native language actually tries to forge an intimate relationship. And this is what has been coined by a very distinguished professor, a botanist called Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she calls it grammar of animacy. So if each one of us look in our vernacular language, We have a gender for everything. And when we have a gender for every bird, every garment that we wear, we no longer objectify, but we subjectify things. And that is the heart of sustainability, is what I see, because it is where we can actually connect with nature and think deeper about what we are doing. Just one more example, that this was 2 years ago, there was an exhibition in Ahmedabad on company paintings of birds done from 1800 to 1804. This is a scarlet minuet, but in Urdu, it is called Sat Sanjkiya Ambi, which means 7 dusk-hued friends with mango-shaped bellies. I was really amazed with the name, because when they said 7 dusk-hued friends, there's an emotion, there's a kind of a behavioral aspect which has been put into a bird, a flock of bird, and also the kind of colors that they were dusk hued at twilight, that you see that light pink, the light orange, and the mango shaped bellies, the way the mangoes are, the bellies. So everything is so beautifully illustrated in our vernacular language that I think we really cared for our diversity in our yesteryears when we gave vernacular names and lived on vernacular names in our own languages, instead of depending so much on English. So another example here is of rain. Now there are 12 different names for rain in my language, in Kathiawadi. So there's a drizzle. I just give you a minute to read on your own on the slide, but it just tells you so much, that for a person who is a cattle herder, he always wears a pachedi, or shawl. So for him, the rain is a pachediva, which means a rain for which he might have to use a pachedi. So there's a name for that. Anuradhar, which means one raindrop joining the other. So it forms a line and it's called Anuradhar. So there's 12 different names, each illustrating form, function, to whom it belongs. So for example, the Dhefa Bang, which means a rain that will break clumps of soil in farm fields. This might be a name referring to a farmer. He will use this name for a rain when he knows that this is a kind of rain breaking down clumps of soil. So this is the beauty of our language. And lastly, if we see just textiles, this is Odhni, we call Odhni. But imagine there are nearly 20 to 25 names for Odhnis in Gujarat. I know some, the first few I could decode. The rest with question marks, I have not been able to decode. And these were names which I got from folk literature. And there's so many unanswered questions for me, which you'll see on the screen, of who made them, where were they made, and how were they made, and how were they draped, and where did these women buy them from? There's so many questions. And what was the etymology of each of these words used just for a simple odhni or a dupatta that we say? And this is just for Kathiawad. Imagine what it would be for the rest of India, who also uses a veil. So, and in the end, I want to say that whether it's textiles or environment, everywhere language, I believe language plays a very important role, because it really is where our culture lies, our heritage lies, and the more we embrace it, the more we become more sensitive towards how we live and how we try to address larger issues that we are facing today. I will end my presentation with this last example. So when I was in 1999 in Kutch, you'll see this picture. I was sitting with these 3 girls. The one in the middle, one night she came to this house where I was living with, at night she came with a plate full of prasad, and it had coconuts in it. So I asked her why was she, distributing this in the village. And she said that she had prayed to the goddess Ashapura Mata in Kutch, that if she learns this Bavaryo stitch, the stitch that you see there, or the one in the colorful stitch, if she learns this stitch, she'll offer a coconut in the temple. Now that moment was a big revelation for me. One, because I was studying textile design at NID 4 years, and I would probably learn this way. You know, the way you see the numbers, I've put 1, 2, 3, whatever, and I'll try to see the steps. And so I was in a very clinical environment, classroom, learning the stitch. Whereas for her, it was everything. It was her way of life, her culture, her. If she didn't know the stitch, she will not be able to make her textiles for her dowries for her wedding. And the word Bavaryo means it's a thorny bush that you see in the landscape, and it has these white, very, long thorns. And that's the way the stitch looks. So this stitch, I think, is an amalgamation of everything that I've tried to say today, that whether it's environment we are looking at, whether it's textiles, whether it's culture, it's one thing to read and understand and, understand it in a professional environment, but being it in a culture, in a traditional knowledge system, it has deeper intangible values. And if we can tap into that and try to understand that, probably that's what it can change the whole perspective on how we look at everything around. So that is from my side. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope I didn't exceed the time, but that's all.
Thank you so much, Medha. I think it's been a lovely, insightful, and very eclectic presentation, because right from, making meaning out of discards using cloth waste to embellishments like beads, I think you've covered the entire spectrum. And what, especially for me, I think two things really matter. One is, of course, the fact that God is in details. You really highlighted that through all the work that you've done, whether it was the applique work or even the bead work that was shared by you. But language is the heart of culture, something that resonates with even Khaki, as an organization. So,
Right.
so delightful presentation, and as can be seen from the chat, there are quite a few interesting feedback, compliments. So I'm going to go through them one by one. So Milind says it's tantalizing work that you've shared. Dr. Vivek Mendonça has said he shared a comment, not a question, but apparently they have arranged waste textile and made half sleeve, full sleeve shirts under light of life. Dr. Vinita organization headed by Sri Ramesh Daswani. What the shirts gifted by him were appreciated as designer shirts. Then Jyoti Kerkar said, what fascinated me was, even amid the arid land of Kutch, how did they think of making such colorful applique work? So that's amazing. So as you rightly said, it's all about imagination. Then again, Jyotish has asked for the name of the folk singer from Kathiawar.
Yeah, I'll just type that name. Yeah.
Sure. And then again, Vivek says he's requested for your website, email, mobile number, and he shared his mobile number also. And Naina says, thank you for taking us through this wonderful eco-conscious approach to creativity and storytelling. Loved your thoughtful, well-researched art pieces too. Where can I read your research work on beadwork? That's the question.
You can Google my name, and also my YouTube has some presentations that I've made at Textile Society of America, and you'll find few research articles that I have written which are already published. So just Google my name and you'll find it there.
Great. Then Milind says, Medha, your work is breathtaking and so thoughtful. Loved it and learned a few things. Thank you. Karen says, excellent presentation. Thank you. Sharmita says, is it possible to procure appliques from women artisans working across our country?
I didn't understand the question. What kind of applique works? Because is it the applique work of Kerala that you're speaking about? Because you have Pipli work of Orissa, which is again very different. And then you have applique work of Kutch, which is again very different. So.
Yes, I meant Kerala applique.
Okay. It's difficult to find now because the organization has moved further and the women who I worked with went into other fields of work. some part of it is really amazing because with the kind of money they earned, they educated their children to 12th standard, and these were ninth fail girls. So they, after the kind of time we had together, many of them gave their own 10th and 12th exam and now are working in the health and other areas. So I'm not so sure you'll find these applique works with them for now. This was way back, nearly 15-20 years ago.
Got it. Then Jyoti says, super presentation, would love to connect with you, Medha. Arjun Patwal says, loved it. Desai, Mr. Desai says, well done, Medha. Yeah, I guess, again, there's no name there, but amazing a word you used through the presentation, and the connections that have come through are very insightful. Do you have an Instagram handle, is what Jyoti Kerkar is asking.
Yes, I do have.
If you
I'll
can
just type that. Yeah.
And then there's a question from another question. Again, name is not mentioned. Would be good to know organizations where we can give used fabric for such work. Very important. Yeah. So the question, Medha, was, would be good to know organizations where we can give used fabric for such work. So would you know of any given?
There are a lot of organizations in and around who would love to do that. But personally speaking, I have my reservations about this because when I started working with, old clothes, and later I had my own studio, the amount of discard I got was unbelievable. And I think, see, I work with art. My studio never ends. I always feel, when will this sack finish? It doesn't finish. So, ideally speaking, it doesn't work you giving your old clothes to somebody because they are mounted. I can tell you sitting here that they are not finished with the old clothes that they've already got. So if you can do something yourself with it, is the best thing you can do. Because I have personally seen that I started collecting discards from door to door, whether it was plastic, thermocol, paper, and I was making a whole lot of products. But over the time, I realized after 3-4 years that they were not changing their patterns of using thermocol and plastic bottles. They would see my face and just call me and say, Medha, just come and pick up. Our bags are full, collect it. And so it's a never-ending cycle. I think recycling is a failed model in many ways because imagine so much we have to throw, and how much will the person who's trying to try to use it, and how much even will they be able to consume. So whether it's recycling, upcycling, all end of the pipe solutions, but they don't answer the larger question of how do we reduce discard. So after 25 years of working with this, I'm now focusing. I do my art because it's my bread and butter. I do make products which create awareness, but I've reached a focus where how I can reduce discarding things. So if you can do that, I think that will be the best way to answer the question, answer your conscience also, what you will do and where will you throw away.
Great. So I think that's point noted. There's no dearth of the raw material per se, but yeah. Faridun has mentioned it's very eye-opening session. He says he's from Bhuj, Kutch, and always good to learn more about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So those were the questions from the audience. So keep them coming. Till then, I can ask a couple of questions from my side, Medha, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
So what is one traditional practice you feel we urgently need to bring back from all that you've worked, whether it's in Kerala or Gujarat, or maybe just extrapolating on what you've seen in these couple of states that you worked in?
I think one thing that we can do is buy less. We need to start from there because if we do that, then we don't have to worry, because unfortunately, we live in a time where, we go to DMart or something, any of these supermarkets. You've gone to, your shampoo is over, you're going to buy your shampoo. You'll see an offer saying buy two, get one free. So you'll end up buying three, and imagine what you do. So the first thing, what we all can do if we really want to address any of this upcycling, sustainability, that we start buying less. I know it's against capitalism, against our GDPs, but that's the only way we can address it. Otherwise, no other. So I myself practice it. Like, what I wear is my son's clothes because he's grown out of it, or and I make mine, or what my mother, my father, we all have been frugal. And I think it's just not my family. All our parents always did it. If you see our parents from the 70s, 80s, 90s, not 90s, but at least till the 80s, I can say that they all had a very frugal lifestyle, and it was possible. So I think starting by buying less and being thoughtful about what has gone into making that product. So, for example, buying jeans. Very few of us know that for one pair of jeans, 30,000 liters of water goes into it, right from the farm to the final, the wash, acid wash, whatever. And then we just, we have 3-4 pairs of jeans. The more it's torn, the more there is acid wash, the more, you pay for it. But the amount of polluting that we do to the system, to the environment. So I'm not saying no to jeans, but I would say buy one and live it through and know what you're buying, what has gone into buying. So if we value the system that has gone into making something, that's also one practice that we can do. So whatever you buy, if you know how it has come, where it has come, what it has impacted, I think it will reduce much of our problems.
Yeah.
Buying something local, things like that.
In fact, that was going to be my next question, how working with waste has changed your own consumption habits. You just answered it. So what advice would you give someone who wants to start making art from everyday discards? Is there something that you'd like to share from your experience?
I personally feel anybody can do art, because the way I have worked with women from all walks of life, who knew stitching, who not necessarily, have done design or drawing class or anything of that such. But we all have that artistic instinct. The challenge is time. I think that is the biggest challenge we face today. So, but anything we create, we make an Instagram reel, put pictures to that also. So it's so exciting for us. I get excited when I make that. I put pictures together. The rhythm of the music is fitting perfectly with everything. It's same thing with this. So of course, I think from the stitch point of view, but during COVID, I took a lot of courses online. And because nobody could go out to the market, we had to only deal with materials that were around. And whether it was garden, scraps of dry leaves to even plastic or any of that. There are many things one can do. We have DIY sessions, but even if we don't do anything, don't throw away, give it a thought. Cut up the plastic bottle and make it into a potted plant is also amazing creation one can do, adding a little ribbon to it. But before throwing away, think twice what one will do. But again, I don't have answers for thermocols that come with washing machines and all of that. They should take it back. So I would not answer to that. But I do realize in today's times, time is a big challenge. But art is something which is intuitive. If it's done from the heart on a Sunday afternoon or while watching a movie, it's nothing satisfies than making something with your own hands. And that art can be defined by you in any way possible. There's no framework for it, I think.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much. I think I've run out of my own questions and I don't see any more questions from the audience. And I think we are good in time. So thank you once again, Medha. I think it's been delightful listening to you talk about your work.
Thank you, Priya.
Thank you.
Priya.
And
Thank you
thanks to
so
the
much.
audience who's been also engaged with us. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Ed. Thank you so much.